So I think most people have been admitted to the room now, so we'll begin. I'm Sarah Jones from the EOSC Executive Board and the Fair Working Group. And today the EOSC Symposium is going to focus on the implementation challenges of EOSC. So we're going to hear about work from the architecture and fair working groups and sustainability in this opening panel. Rupert Lueck will introduce the MVE, and then Jean-François will give us an introduction to the work of the architecture group, and then Oscar Corcho will talk about the interoperability framework. And then later in the day, we'll dig into more detail on some of the outputs of these groups. So we'll look at the PID policy about fair practice and AAI. And then we have a final panel session later in the day about widening EOSC to public and private sectors. And I know many people have been joining the drop-in clinics. These have been quite interactive. I hope, again, that happens today. So you can also ask your questions at that kind of free-form session. And I'm going to just paste in the chat just before we begin the Slido. So if you want to ask questions as we go, please add them to the Slido, and we'll take them after the first half hour after these first three talks. So Rupert, if you want to begin, that would be fantastic.
Okay. Good morning, Sarah. Good morning, everybody. Let me try sharing my screen. Can you let me know that you see the slides?
Yeah, we see that.
Okay. Thanks a lot. So it's been already great, two fantastic days, and we have seen a lot, learned a lot. Today, as Sarah pointed out, there is a bit more on implementation. And this is a session, this talk will introduce the minimum viable EOSC, a concept that has been brought forward by the Sustainability Working Group. The Sustainability Working Group, I have the pleasure to co-chair with Lilia Borrell, Damien from Science Europe, and we are working and have been working to provide strategic, legal and financing recommendations to the governance board, executive board, and the stakeholders to enable operational, scalable, and sustainable EOSC Federation after 2020, so towards the end of the year. We have been, in terms of a work process, we have been working on an iterative approach to push forward and document through a series of iterations, starting from a strawman document that was brought forward in summer 2019, that had been running through a consultation process and collected feedback from the governance board, the executive board, the working groups, and the Horizon 2020 EOSC projects. This feedback has been integrated into a Tin-Man document version, again run through consultation at the beginning of this year. At the same time, we had started studies on a number of subjects based on co-creation activities, and I will highlight that in a minute. This feedback again has been integrated into a final version we call the Iron Lady, and that is currently being discussed. So here in this iteration and of these documents, we try to develop a model for an iterative approach to grow EOSC gradually, including the establishment of a minimum viable EOSC that will allow and that will enable federation of existing and planned research data infrastructures plus complementary services for the benefit of publicly funded research, and then will also serve as a way to pave the future road towards further iterations, including additional sectors such as the public sector or the industry. The material here that is presented today is based on the draft Iron Lady from 19th of October, which I will provide a link in a minute for towards the end of the presentation. On top of the feedback that we have collected, which I have outlined before, we have specifically worked with a number of task forces that were established across members of the working group, and where we have been working with the landscaping, the rules of participation, architecture, and fair working groups to discuss in detail some of these aspects and to collect their feedback. On top of that, there has been on the right-hand side a number of studies that were carried out or are currently concluding. The ones in light gray have already concluded around several topics. First of all, the legal and strategic advice that we collected through the current report that has informed many of the aspects to create and to launch the EOSC Association. And we see that we have seen that happening or are seeing that happening. We have been working together with the study of analyzing the EOSC core operational cost by across limits and boundaryless. Then there has been a risk, EOSC risk governance study by AM and Hewitt, and by Industry Commons Foundation, a study on expanding EOSC towards the other sectors, public sector and industry sector. We will have a speaker in the panel session this afternoon. The assessment of the country sheets by the Digital Curation Center has informed us on landscaping aspects, and the Fair Forever long-term data preservation by Digital Preservation Coalition has been looking at long-term data preservation activities. So all of this, plus the feedback that we have received, thanks to the very enthusiastic stakeholder community and the different board governance and executive boards and the working groups, we have been able to bring forward a report called the Iron Lady. As a fun fact, some of this that will be the final deliverable, and since this is the final deliverable, some in the group have already started to think about even alternatives to that name, and maybe would consider to name that My Fair Lady. I leave it up to the community to decide whether or not that's a good idea. The first iteration of EOSC will be the minimum viable EOSC. It will, as we discussed, enable the federation of research data infrastructures plus complementary services. The MVE will include a thin layer of core services, the EOSC core, that will enable the federation of fair data sets. And around this, a digital marketplace called EOSC Exchange that will include thematic and domain-specific services that will be able to work with the federated data sets. Partially, some of them will be rival services, we imagine. The main focus and added value will be around connecting disciplinary infrastructures and to enable cross-disciplinary research. And we see the federation of research data infrastructures into EOSC happening via the cluster and regional projects as the critical first step in order to also demonstrate the success of the MVE. In terms of the EOSC core services, there is a number of areas of services and policy aspects I would like to highlight. First of all, we think there is a need to establish a shared open science policy framework to effectively embed a data compliance framework around open and fair data, defining and applying the rules for those artifacts and elements that are published, shared, and reused. Furthermore, there needs to be an instantiation of the EOSC interoperability framework, which is a term that has been brought forward by the architecture working group, and that will include a framework around authentication and authorization, AAI, a persistent identifiers framework around to generate and reserve PIDs. Importantly, an interoperability metadata framework to ensure interoperability of data sets and metadata within and across disciplines. That will be a priority because there has not been looked so deeply in existing Horizon 2020 projects. There is further a data access framework that will make sure that data is available and offered as data as a service. Furthermore, the service management and access framework that will inform about what e-services, e-science services are offered, what scientific problem they will address, what are the capacities operationally, how can these services be accessed, and in the end, who pays. Finally, an open metrics framework will allow to monitor the usage, performance, user satisfaction, the value for money, for the success of EOSC, and also inform the stakeholder community, but also funding organizations. Finally, there needs to be security policies and procedures to put in place together with incident response mechanisms to cater for certain related activities. Operational support needs to exist as in the form of some help desk or and training activities around what is available and made available through the EOSC core, and those who are using the EOSC core, and last but not least, a web portal or a web page that serves as a central landing page that could inform users who are new to EOSC and act as a first starting point. We also imagine and are well aware that there will be many web portals, domain-specific, that are either already existing in the domains and will be part of the EOSC exchange, or will be newly curated. Looking at the big picture, it is clear to us that EOSC vision does not need to be limited to only linking data sets, federating of infrastructures, or aligning policies. It is really linking the stakeholders across the whole data lifecycle and across the European research ecosystem. Therefore, EOSC has to be inclusive and supplement the activities that are existing in the research communities. However, it also needs to be clear, and that is a point that came very clearly from the feedback we see. There's a strong divergence across and within the different stakeholder groups about the benefits and the cost of EOSC, as well as the disruption it could cause and may cause to existing structures, decision-making processes, and funding models. So EOSC has to acknowledge that such tensions exist, and we need to work jointly on reconciling them. And we see an iterative approach will be needed to progressively build trust and to resolve some of these conflicts between the stakeholders and make sure that we are adhering to common grounds, and at the same time also be aware that not all of the solutions are already available and the answers are already known today. There has to be an objective assessment of what has been achieved and what is the success of EOSC with each of the iterations, and this is where the matrix framework comes into play. And finally, the creation of EOSC Association is of course an important first achievement, and it can and will hopefully provide a forum where the stakeholders resolve these differences, and we are able to jointly commit to the EOSC vision. In summary, the minimum viable EOSC will enable the federation of data infrastructures plus complementary services for the benefit of publicly funded researchers in research, accessing openly available fair data across disciplines. And the MVE will be necessary in order to establish an initial implementation of EOSC that will bring value to the users beyond of what is available and what is in use in the current infrastructures. The draft Iron Lady or My Fair Lady document will now be available via the EOSC Liaison platform. The link we will be copying into the chat in a minute, and we appreciate if you could send your feedback to this mailing list by 28th of October. With that, I would really take the opportunity to thank all in the working group for their very hard and committed work throughout the last 1.5 years, for all the feedback that the stakeholders across EOSC have been brought forward into this document with the governance board and executive boards and others to make sure that joint activity will happen. Thank you very much. I hand over back to Sarah.
Thank you very much, Rupert. That was a great overview to the work that's been done. So there are a couple of questions in Slido, but I'm going to hold those until the end so we can have a longer discussion. So Jean-François, if you would like to pick up on the architecture update. Okay, excellent. We see your slides and they're now in slide view. Go ahead. Oh, you maybe need to unmute.
Here.
Yep,
Can
perfect.
you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you now.
Okay, so this is the last symposium of the transition period, and so we've had there've been symposia before, and we've had the opportunity to introduce the work of the architecture working group. Today, I will just, of course, make in 10 minutes just make an update of the whole work that has been going on in this working group and with its exchanges to the community at large. And well, I have difficulty moving my slide. How do I do that? Oh,
so there is a little icon at the bottom. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Okay, so the architecture working group was created at the end of the spring of 2019. We created the team over the summer, and in particular discussed the issues, the topics that we should focus on. And the decision was taken then to have two task forces, one on the persistent identifiers. Well, I'll use PID for the rest of the talk, and then one on authentication and authorization infrastructure, AAI. So those two task forces have been in operation for a little more than a year. And after having contributed to the PID policy document, which together with the FAIR working group, we are opening for consultation today the PID architecture document, which has been developed over the year. Similarly, on the AAI front, work was first the basic principles were put forward on what is it that we're trying to achieve, and then similarly today we're opening for consultation the AAI architecture document. Those two documents are accessible from the symposium page, but more importantly, in the next session, they will be covered entirely. So this is as much as I will say on those two documents, since we will talk about them in the next session. I will spend more time on the third task force, the scholarly infrastructures for research software, which is also producing, opening for consultation its report. So the three reports are available and open for consultation from you. In order to be complete on what the architecture working group has done, Rupert mentioned in his previous presentation that the architecture working group contributed to the minimum viable layers discussion. So I will not go back to that in this session, in this presentation. And in the next presentation, Oscar Corcho will present the EOSC interoperability framework, where again, of course, there was a contribution for the architecture working group. So from now on, in the few minutes that are left for this presentation, I will focus on the scholarly infrastructure for research software. Okay, so this task force, different from the two previous one, the PID and the AI one, was approved in June of this year. So it's only 4 months of work that produced the report that I will introduce this. So, and for the same reason, of course, during the last symposium session in May, it was not even in existence. The whole idea came from the fact that writing, the partnership proposal, the SRIA, all the documents we've discussed on the first day in particular, it was becoming clear that while everybody agreed that publication, data, and software were the three pillars that were needed for open science, there was limited effort so far on research software in the of course there are many efforts in research software around the world, but in the scope of EOSC. So we decided to create a task force to see how EOSC could have its share in evolving the landscape of research software. So we decided to create a task force with the same way we did for the other ones, with a nomination by the EOSC Architecture Working Group, of course. But since the topic of research software infrastructure is recent, we decided to add 9 existing infrastructure engaged in research software in order to have a scope of skills, representation, and experience within the task force. So that was done in June 2020, and we held weekly meetings over the summer to produce the report that I will briefly introduce, and will encourage you to go read. And so the chairs of the working group were Roberto Di Cosmo from Software Heritage, one of the 9 infrastructure, and Jose Benito Gonzalez Lopez from Zenodo, another one of the existing infrastructure. And we received, of course, the support from the EOS Secretariat, from Lueck Schreiber, and I take the opportunity to thank the chairs and Lueck from Roberto, Jose, and Lueck for their hard work in driving this 4-month effort leading to the report we are delivering today. Okay, the report. So on the right-hand side, you have the 9 organizations that I mentioned in the previous slides, organized in 3 categories that we decided was there for the purpose of being organized in the way we worked, right? So I will come back in the next slide on the various roles of archives, publishing, and publishers and aggregators. A brief overview of the report. So first, looking at research software, we agreed that the 4 pillars for developing research software infrastructure were archiving, of course, since we all have to remember that this is recent, right? In all the actions that we were able to present in the report in the state of the art, most of them start after 2010. Right, so there are a few exceptions, but most of the effort on research software infrastructure, one way or another, started in 2010, and for very significant ones, even later, 2015, for example. So the archiving by itself, which is well known for other for documents or data, is more recent when it comes to research software. Reference and describe are similar to the elements that needs to be applied for data or documents. Credit is more special because the work of developing software has its own specificities, and crediting the various activities that are part of developing research software needs special attention. So as a normal report, when you start in such a new discipline, of course, you start with the state of the art. Where are we? And since the roles of the various existing infrastructure was so different, they were organized in order to identify their own best practices and open problems. And also, we try to identify cross-cutting councils that would go across archives, the archivers, the publishers, and the aggregators. Based upon the state of the art, we tried to look ahead on what could be done now that we were assembling, together the elements of state of the art. And the group made the effort to identify a number of workflows, so which we derive into use cases, and I will come back to that in a moment. But I think it's one of the contributions for the reader, to understand what it takes to develop research software infrastructures. And then, of course, after having created the team, look at the state of the art, identify the use cases, a number of recommendations were put forward. So defining a little bit more what we mean by archiving, publishing, and aggregators. This diagram refers first to the fact that so the left-hand side refers to research software, and the gray elements, industry, public administration, cultural heritage, are the work that will share the Universal Software Archive, but outside of the scope, of course, of this report. So why do we mention Universal Software Archive? Well, because software is an element for which, when we develop a new application, a new service, a new anything based on software, you never start from scratch. You use an operating system, you use programming languages, you use libraries, you use lots of other, you use other applications that have been developed in your domain, and so forth. So the value of the application that you build gets from what you write and what comes from universal software that has been done by others. So you cannot build an archive for research software without connecting to the Universal Software Archive in general. Then on top of it, repositories, publishers, and aggregators are words that carry the message. Of course, within research, we have repository, and in terms of software, of course, scholarly repositories embed, are the places where the results of software development are deposited. Publisher is the role that is similar to or in many cases inherited from the publishers as you know them for documents. And aggregators, in the case of research software, assemble information to help the user find whatever piece of, in this case, research software that he or she needs. So those roles, allowed us, which are totally complementary, of course, to each other, allowed us to get organized in 3 small groups that develop their own best practice, that identify their own best practices, identify their open problems, and then we were able to define the cross-cutting concerns across the whole domain. So that's how we work. So I'm just showing, don't worry, I won't get into the detail of the workflow, but I just show a simple workflow here. And you can imagine that there are 13 of them. This one described the archive in one of the representation, which is software heritage. I show a more complex one where in a conference organization, the assessment includes assessing the software. So we went at this level of detail, and I encourage you, of course, to look at the other workflows that are presented in the report in order to define the use cases that led to the recommendations by which I will end this presentation. Short-term recommendations. So, well, it was obvious that the 9 constituency of the working group, and I'm sure there are others, of course, were, by the way, we are not claiming being representative of the whole planet, right? But I think the group was diverse enough to be able to extract the problems as I was cut, wasn't I?
Jean-François, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm back.
Okay,
I understand
good.
that I was cut. I mean, that's probably an internet connection problem.
Yeah.
Was that on this particular slide?
So we were just on like your concluding slides around the software. So I don't know if you want, I don't know if screen share will affect it again. So if you want to just
you lose my screen share also.
Yeah, if you want to just verbally wrap up, because we should move on as well time-wise, because there are a number of questions coming in.
Yes, so I was wrapping up with the two slides on recommendations. So one on interaction between archive, publisher, and aggregators. Special work needs to be done on metadata standards and tools for software, generalizing the use of persistent identifiers, which are not yet the case in general, in particular from the user perspective, and pay special attention to citation. And do you see my screen?
Yeah, we still see your screen. So we're on slide 8. If you want to just jump to the final slide and up, that'd be great.
Yeah, if I succeed in doing so. Here you go. And then a few longer term recommendations. Working on advanced technologies. There are efforts going on now on open plagiarism detection and advanced search engine. And of course, integration with publication and data, which is at the origin of this whole work, and make sure that what is done around research software can be integrated with the rest of the research artifacts. And finally, of course, I will conclude by saying that the common infrastructure for archiving, referencing, describing, crediting software should be as open as possible, and in particular, in the case of software, open source license by default should be the rule. And of course, there might be exceptions, but they should be very well explained. So I'll close on that. And sorry for the mess.
No worries, that's perfect. It's a perfect segue actually to one of the things I expect Oscar will speak about, because we cover licensing in the interoperability framework. So thank you very much, Jean-François. So next we're going to hear from Oscar Corcho about the interoperability framework, which covers various aspects, including legal aspects and licensing. So Oscar, do you want to share your screen and go ahead?
Let me see. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So thanks, Jean-François, for these starting points here on the infrastructures for research software, because I mean there will be points over here that will be also addressing them. So just to give you an update of the work that has been done in the context of the EOSC Interoperability Framework Task Force, where we have been working for around 1.5 years. Basically, let me just go. Just a little bit of history and the near future, just for you to know where we are. We released a very initial version of the EOSC Interoperability Framework in May this year. You have the link over there, and probably, I mean, as we will be sharing the slides, you will have access to it if you wish. These materials have been used, as we have seen already, on some of the SRIA sections on interoperability, also for the sustainability group, as it was discussed before. Since then, we have been receiving comments, from many different groups, those working on the sustainability group, several projects, institutions, individuals. We have been collecting all of them. Most probably, I mean, you don't have access to that Google Drive link, but I mean, I have it for my own purposes also to have a link to everything, but no worries, I mean, because we will be providing a summary of all the results of how we have been addressing all these comments that we have received in the last months, even in the last couple of weeks, some of them. And finally, our next step, going into the second version of the interoperability framework that addresses all these comments, is addressing the comments. I know that there are a few more coming, for instance, currently from Elixir. I have been told, I have not seen them yet, but we will be receiving them soon as well. We will include a study on legal interoperability, as Sarah has been commenting recently, that was handled via co-creation request. And I think that, I mean, the team over there did a very good job at identifying many of the legal aspects that had to be considered in this framework. And now we are currently working on extending, taking into account some of the comments, the European Interoperability Reference Architecture, giving more details on which are the components that we think that should be in a minimal interoperability framework, and also working on a use case with the COVID-19 data portals to show how interoperability affects or has been tackled in some of them. So this is the ongoing work. I mean, I will end up also, I mean, with this list of things, yeah, that we will have there. Now, I mean, I thought that it would be a good idea just to give you like a very general overview of which are like the main contents that you can find in the interoperability framework document, so that, I mean, I can just drive you through these aspects and how we have decided to, or why we have decided to organize it in such a way. So if you see, I mean, like apart from the usual introduction explaining what we are working with, the most important piece probably over here is talking about the interoperability layers. You will see 4 layers over there: technical, semantic, organizational, and legal. The legal part was not in version 1, as I have commented, but I mean, we have now all the material ready for this version 2. But basically, I mean, like, we were basing the idea of using these layers based on the work that had been done already on the European Interoperability Framework for EU public administrations. So this was like the basis that we were taking into account. We were seeing whether this could be also considered, yeah, in the context of the work that we were doing. And our main idea, our main objective was to see how we could handle things like data, applications, services, metadata, all those elements that we need to be considering whenever we are talking about interoperability. There are a couple of main principles, I mean, and when getting some of the comments that we have received from different stakeholders, projects, research infrastructures, and so on, I think that, I mean, I would like to reiterate a few clear things that we will make even more clear in the second version, which is on the one hand, we do not only care about data, we care also about services, about software, about all the other research artifacts that need to be considered, and also the running services, yeah, the services that you need, the workflows that you need in order to work with data. And the main idea that full interoperability, I mean, is difficult to achieve. It does not exist. It's probably not the right term. It's difficult to achieve. And we are going into how can we go as interoperable as possible. Yeah, I mean, like understanding that there will be different levels of interoperability that we can always achieve. So these are some of the key messages that we are going to be using, and they will be more clearly put in the second version. That said, I mean, there is a section where for each of these layers, we are mostly focusing on the problems and needs that we have identified after running several interviews with different research infrastructures, with service providers, with data providers, and so on. And then, I mean, we have a set of recommendations, many of which have been those ones that we have put in this RIA documents. Yeah. So I have just included them over here, I mean, just so that the slides are complete. Obviously, the document is there. I will just only focus on some of them that have not been addressed yet. I mean, like in the context of technical interoperability, they have been already discussed before, yeah, by Rupert when talking about the EOSC core and this instantiation for the EOSC IF that EOSC core should have, yeah. Open specifications, common security and privacy framework, an AII framework as well, having easy access to data sources, coarse grain and fine grain data set search, and a clear PID policy. All these elements have been already included, yeah, in the Iron Lady, or whatever name we want to use for that document, yes, as you have been discussing on the chat. Next, we have also been providing recommendations related to semantic interoperability. And in these ones, I mean, as you may probably expect, in general, we are talking about having very clear and precise definitions for the terms that are being used, having associated documentation for all the semantic artifacts, yeah? The ontologies, vocabularies, thesauri, common data models, all those elements that are being made available, that they should be preferably open, that we should have repositories of those artifacts and a clear governance framework for them, and then having the possibility of having extensibility options in the sense that different communities will still use different semantic artifacts. There may be a common interoperability metadata framework as it has been discussed for the EOS core, but at the same time, I mean, we have to enable the possibility of having different communities providing their own metadata and putting it all together so that whenever you understand some metadata, you can actually access those objects understood in a very general manner. So that said, these are the recommendations for semantic interoperability. There are a few of them only for the organizational interoperability. We have to admit that, I mean, there were less things, yeah, that we could just refer to. And in fact, I mean, the rules of participation work is mostly the one that is addressing these parts. And we are talking again about data, about services, and so on. And finally, just to give you like a snippet of some of the key recommendations that have come from the work on legal interoperability. There are much longer documents that are also really interesting to read if you are interested in these topics, and that will be accompanying documents to the main IF document. We are quite clear on the point that we should have a list of EOSC recommended licenses, together with some analysis of their compatibility with member states' recommended licenses. This is quite relevant. They should have a human, I mean, they should be available for humans, but also for machines. And I mean, one of the recommendations that we are providing is that there should be a very clear repository. I know that they exist, that there are already several efforts that have been done, but having a clear repository of licenses that can be used and they are also machine readable would be also a must, yeah, for according to our point of view. Then there are other forms of IPR. I mean, Jean-François has been talking about software, and there are also lots of things related to copyright of software and so on. But I mean, in general, it's also relevant to keep track of things that may have patent claims pending or existing, that may have commercially confident information, mechanisms to ensure compliance with GDPR and all personal and sensitive data, and private laws would be also considered. So, I mean, I'm not an expert in the legal domain, as you can imagine, yeah, but the documents that we have and that will be accompanying the IF version 2 are also much more detailed on these topics, and some of the key recommendations are these ones, yeah, that we have over here, and if I'm not wrong, have been already included in the SRIA as well, yeah. Mm-hmm. So that said, we have continued a little bit more working on the model components that we should have. I'm not going to go into many details over here because it's still there is a little bit of work in progress. But basically, I mean, like in terms of the main components that we think that the IF should have in an implementation, we were already talking about the PID infrastructure, and the idea of having an ecosystem of services that can resolve the references into interoperability artifacts, having this context of fair digital objects understood as a general concept, not as a very specific implementation, so that we can manage the granularity of metadata that we have. And finally, we are proposing like a general abstract models for all these interoperability artifacts. All this work is also based on a work that has been provided in the past, that has been worked in the past. We have to incorporate the latest recommendations coming from the architecture working group, from the sustainability working group. So I mean, like that, so that they are all consistent. But I mean, we all know that they are consistent, and the main idea or the main view that we have is that all these digital objects that we have should have different layers of metadata associated to them, so that we can actually achieve this idea of having as much interoperability as possible, yeah, in all these areas. So we are working on nice representations of this, yeah. Do not worry about this. I'm not going to try to explain this, and I know that Chris is in the call, and I mean he has been playing a little bit more with this overview of okay, how much interoperability can we achieve? This will not be the final overview that we will provide, but I mean, we want to come up with all these nice views as well, so that they can be presented everywhere else. Yeah. Okay. So that said, as I have commented, our next steps really short term, so as to have everything on time. Addressing all the comments that we have received and that we know that we are going to receive very soon. Yeah. Updating all the recommendations on legal interoperability. So if you, we have already those documents, probably we can make them available in case that anybody wants to go into them already. But I mean, they will be soon in the version 2. And we are now working more on these very specific, clear components, descriptions. I mean, more what the software developers, service providers would be expecting to see also in an interoperability framework document. Yeah. So that, I mean, we are talking also about architecture, as Jean-François has been showing us sequence diagrams. Yeah, I mean, it will be also somehow similar, yeah, to this type of representation. Okay, so that's all from our side. I hope that I have been able to kind of summarize all the work that we have been doing.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Oscar. So we have a number of questions in the chat. I'm going to try and get through most of them in this next 10 minutes, or possibly steal 5 minutes from your break time. But I'm going to begin with the ones that came in around the MVE. So Rupert, there's a couple of questions that are kind of pointed towards you. So the first one around what the actual term MVE means is, how are we defining it? Is it picking up that minimum viable product concept? But also, I don't know if you want to respond to the questions that we've had many in the chat around the access to the document. I think some people are struggling to log into the liaison platform, and I think we, Vinchani can't hear me, but hopefully Rupert can. Yeah, so if you want to respond to that and how we can make things openly accessible.
Okay, let's start with the first one, around the definition of MVE. We see it as being the minimum viable EOSC, not in the context as an MVP, a minimum viable product that you would probably use in commercial activities to demonstrate the value to the customer and to set it as a first instance. Here, it is really the bare minimum of making sure that we have the possibility to link fair and open data sets and federate those into the EOSC. It's really the bare minimum of what we can show to start to demonstrate some added value to the researchers. The second question, it is difficult to access for some of those, for some to access the document in the liaison platform. Basically, it has been requested to us that we put it into the liaison platform. So the deadline and the access has not been set by the working group, but also was a recommendation by the European Commission. We will make sure that together with the Secretariat that you get access to that document. I think it is the registration process, and there might be one step that might be particularly difficult to make sure that you click the right kind of button so that you can access this document. But we have tested this before, and it works, and so we are quite confident that people can access it through that link. If there is further issues popping up, I think the Secretariat will be able to help.
Yeah, and we'll certainly make sure we address those, and you know, it's problematic if people can't get that access, so we'll find some way around. So please do raise those questions. I see many people have found the voting buttons, so I'm going to come to Volker's question next. So Volker had asked about you know, measuring the progress in EOSC, and one of the recommendations is to create a rewards and recognition framework by 2021, 2022. And there's a question there about, you know, whether that is too soon. I don't know who would like to reflect on that, potentially Jean-François or Rupert.
My quick answer would be, without any incentives, researchers will probably hesitate to engage in EOSC, and I think we need to strive for rapid uptake, and that is one of the activities that we would see as creating momentum.
Excellent. And just coming back on the earlier question, Rupert, there are some more comments in the chat about why not just release the document publicly, but only make people force them to log in to provide feedback. That's potentially something we could consider.
We definitely would make like to make it publicly available. I think this is something that we need to discuss with those involved. And as I said, the sustainability working group would not have any issue with that. Yeah.
And I know in other working groups, so in FAIR, for example, we've really tried to use Google Docs and publish things on Zenodo because I think it is really important that we ensure people can get access to content. So maybe we can't solve this one right now, but it's definitely something that the EOSC Association should be taking forward.
We should probably also consider, I mean, the previous documents have already been made available.
Armand, could you mute, please?
And it seems this has worked with quite a variety of stakeholders. So I would be surprised that this would not work this time.
Excellent, thanks, Rupert. So I'm going to come to the question from Andrew Trelaw. So Jean-François, this is picking up on comments you'd made about the software work, and I think there's a broader question here, so not even just with this software work, but generally within EOSC, how we make sure we link between different activities and groups. So the comments here about the Research Software Alliance, the RDA, 411, how are we envisaging that we'll come together with different groups when we're working on those recommendations? I don't know if there's been discussion in your group on that.
Yes, so thanks, Sarah. So I'll try to answer both. Oh, the Neil question. So Andrew, and there was a question from Neil a second ago, which disappeared for some reason. So the answer to this is that this, as I reminded everybody, or not reminded, as I said to everybody, this is work that has been launched in June. And we knew that we had to deliver now because this is the end of the transition period and so forth. So we decided to focus on infrastructure for research software for, as I said, archiving, referencing, describing, and citing research software next to publication and data. Of course, so that's for the 4 months. So the relationship between all, I mean, RDA, 411, and so on is obvious, right? And actually this morning in my mail, I got requests to make a presentation of our work to a 411 meeting in November. So no, it has not been engaged yet because we had to work and produce, and it was already a serious challenge to produce the report within the 4 months. Yes, the relationship should be developed, not more than developed. It's essential, right? That this effort is linked with the efforts that are mentioned in Andrew's statement. Now, in Neil's question, which here it is, yes, it's the report focus on, as I said, archiving, referencing, describing, and citing, and not on development and community building. So we'll have to connect to that, but this was on purpose. Again, within 4 months with the small team over the summer, that was as much as we thought we could achieve. But of course, that effort will have to be embedded into all the other efforts.
Excellent, thanks very much. And actually one point maybe to highlight, we have put research software as a priority in the strategic research and innovation agenda. So this is an area where we're kind of pushing for more investment in the next framework program, because it's come up as a gap both in the architecture and in the FAIR working group. And just to pick up on this relationship with bodies like RDA and 411 in general, because Maggie had a question about whether at an EOSC level we have plans to kind of collaborate with those groups. It is something we'd put in the EOSC work plan, that we make sure that we're not looking just at European level, we're trying to get international consensus, and we're using these bodies to get feedback on EOSC work, and also to make sure that we collaborate in a way that enables us to co-build solution. So there are relevant groups like the Global Open Research Commons Working Group in RDA, which is looking at EOSC and similar initiatives in other areas of the world. So I think it's really important that we don't kind of have a European blinker on things. So I'll maybe take Sophie's question next, because that's the one with most votes. Would we have an example of strong divergence between the stakeholders on the different objectives of EOSC that we have to solve? I don't know who would like to speak to this.
I think that's for Rupert. He opened that Pandora box.
So I think there's many. So to pick on some, I think there is probably not always a consistent opinion on whether or not should public and commercial services coexist in the EOSC exchange, or should they be separated? Another example would be on funding and formulas to determine the level of contributions of the individual stakeholders and the countries to funding. Would it be based on GDP, population size, science society size, or other kind of metrics? That would be some of the aspects. There is a variety of views how storing of data and long-term preservation of data is being captured. Whereas the responsibility for that is that EOSC, should that be EOSC responsibility? Should that be responsibility of the federated data infrastructures and service infrastructures? So there's quite a variety of different views, and so I think you can easily imagine, with the with the complexity of the many different stakeholders you have involved across the landscape, there is quite different views, and we simply need to see this and reflect that this is something that gradually we can solve together from within the activities in the association and beyond.
Yeah, I think those differences in viewpoints are, they're going to happen regardless. It's inevitable. What matters is having constructive dialogue. So we need the fora in order to have that. And I think the way that we've run EOSC over the last couple of years with the executive board and the governance board and the working groups has enabled some of that dialogue. And I think we need, very strong structures similarly going forward through the EOSC Association to ensure that we bring all of those stakeholders together and we hear the different views and find a way forward that's collective across us all. There were useful comments, actually, Jean-François. I don't know if your group will want to pick up on these, but comments from Jonathan Tedds and others in the chat about ways in which we can pursue that software work.
Yes. You want me to?
If you'd like to reflect on it, by all means.
Sure. So everybody has to understand that we're ending a transition period, right? And for us, there is a deadline on December 31st, 2020, where all this organization will disappear and a new one will be built by the EOSC Association, right? So the EOSC Association will take the decisions that they have to take in order to organize those working groups. We can open that conversation, but everybody has to understand that and it's an opportunity also to answer Costas, who said, how can we apply to become a member of these task forces? Those task forces, as the names, they're just task forces. So they have delivered the report and they're done. Others will be created, other working groups will be created, possibly by the EOSC Association, but it's not for us, and at least not for me, to do that. But you should expect that putting together the EOSC Association, similar efforts will be put in place. I don't want to prejudge what they will be.
Exactly. I mean, this is something I wanted to reflect on as well, because GÉANT, where I'm based, is one of the founding members of that association. The statutes for the EOSC Association envisage other bodies, so working groups, task forces, however they want the association wants to convene those. There will be a first General Assembly at the end of this year where all of the members will, essentially make the decisions, set fees, think about how the organisation should be run, and elect all the directors and the president. So I expect sometime in the spring of next year there will be groups set up. We had some discussion on Monday asking about this. I think from my own perspective, it would be good if there's some kind of continuation, some kind of overlap, because there's been a lot of really useful work done through all of these existing EOSC working groups, and there's a lot of knowledge in those. But I think the association will be setting up groups that continue these activities. And I think, this area of software is one where we do want to do more work. So it's useful if people can share views of how they see things going forward or what they would like, and use the association as a way to vocalize those and to make sure that we set up the relevant groups that are needed. Now, we are 2 minutes into your break so far. I think it might be worth just taking a question around Phoenix, because there have been a number of votes on that. So Philip Seegers had asked about this. There's so much in common being presented. Is there anything missing to Phoenix to bridge to HPC and EOSC? And a question from Patricia about can other countries consider joining Phoenix? I don't know if anyone on the call feels able to respond to those. Rupert, Jean-François, or maybe, I don't know if Philip wants to speak out about Phoenix.
Well, in general, the relationship with, there's been even wider question about the relationship with the HPC, I think on the first day, if I remember correctly. Anyway, so yet again, I'm sorry, it looks like I'm punting the question, but the EOSC Association will be in charge of driving the partnership around EOS starting January, starting early next year. And it's clear it's, in the SRIA, which is the handover document from the transition period to the EOSC Association, the relationship with HPC is highlighted. So yes, there will be a relationship between the two partnerships, even if they have different status. And in particular, it will be on the agenda of the leaders of those two partnerships to decide what is the focus of their first cooperation. And I agree that Phoenix should be certainly on the agenda. So now that's all I can say at the moment, but I'm sure this relationship will occur.
Yeah.
All right, if I may. So
yeah,
I
of
think
course.
what in this context, I think we are looking at the interrelationship between the HPC community, Euro HPC and PRACE, and here I think what we have seen last week, there was the S3 EOSC workshop. That was a very useful dialogue to establish the bridging of the different stakeholder groups and bringing them together. I think a similar event could help if that would be organized maybe by PRACE to bring together EOSC and the HPC community, and to see and explore further what kind of links we can establish and what particular needs would arise, and what kind of activities could be created from this. I think that could be useful in that dialogue.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Rupert. Now, I'm conscious of time and I don't want to eat more than 5 minutes into your break, so I'm going to propose we close the discussion here. There are a couple more questions in the chat around the business model, around PIDs. I would propose that we address those in the Ask Me Anything clinic, or actually in the next session. The next session will pick up on PID specifically. We're going to have 3 20-minute sessions on fair practice, on the PID architecture, and on AI. And at the end of the day, there is the kind of informal Ask Me Anything drop-in clinic, and a number of us will be there again. So do keep asking your questions and we can address them later on. But I want to just have a huge thanks to all of the presenters and to all of you for the questions that you've asked. It's been a really useful session. We will reconvene at 11 o'clock CEST, so whatever time that happens to be in your time zone. And I hope to see you there again. Thank you all.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Sarah.